scrambling to find a peaceful solution as concerns grow that Ethiopia will fall into an all-out civil war.
Tensions have escalated in northern Ethiopia's Tigray region yet again as Ethiopian troops and their allies wage a war against the rebels.
Now let's talk about Ethiopia. It's under a state of emergency. A year-long conflict between the government and a rebel group is escalating. The government's telling people in the capital to take up arms.
It's been 1 year since war broke out between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF. As the TPLF, which initiated this war, advances towards Ethiopia's capital, prompting the government to declare a state of emergency, the war isn't only escalating on the ground, but also on the internet and in the media.
This week we have witnessed the situation in Ethiopia changing by the hour. The war is raging, and even though the terrorist TPLF is being hammered by the Ethiopian forces around Dessie, Kombolcha and other cities, it has continued to unleash its carnage on unarmed civilians in the Amhara region. On the diplomatic front, the United States continued to be worsening the situation rather than helping. On our previous video, Ethiopia, US's next Afghanistan, we have tried to show why the world is now sure that US is tag-teaming with its favorite dictator. Although the Biden administration officials continue to give the usual talking points and denial lip service, its actions cannot be more further clear. Recently, Ambassador Jeffrey Feldman, the special U.S. envoy to President Biden, has visited Ethiopia. His speech after the visit at the Institute of Peace highlights the implicit intent that their subservient TPLF is their choice for Ethiopia. In almost all the speech, he speaks in short, broad terms when he talks about TPLF and unleashes his criticism on the Ethiopian government. Even though we can go line by line to debunk most of his inconsistent statements and falsehoods, we will just expose a few of them next.
But starting in 2020, solidarity between our two governments started to crack. To Ethiopia's understandable annoyance, the previous administration halted some U.S. assistance programs in the misguided belief that Ethiopia might then reconsider its rejection of a draft tripartite agreement tabled by the Trump administration and the World Bank regarding the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is a symbol of national pride for all Ethiopians. Soon after taking office, the Biden-Harris administration recognized the urgent need for meaningful Ethiopian, Sudanese negotiations leading to a mutually acceptable agreement on the filling and the operation of the GERD, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And to that end, the new administration quickly lifted the previous administration's punitive restrictions on U.S. assistance to Ethiopia. We believe that Egypt's need for water security, Sudan's safety concerns, and Ethiopia's development rights can be reconciled through good faith negotiations on the GERD. And the United States will continue to be actively involved with all parties to this end.
Instead of being an impartial mediator, the US wanted to dictate the terms of an agreement that favored Egypt. The proposal that the US wanted to impose on Ethiopia does not give Ethiopia its fair share of the Nile River water resources and demands a guaranteed fixed yearly amount of water flow. It does not provide a water sharing agreement for climate change and does not address what will happen during future drought. Egypt wants to take advantage of the dam and impose guaranteed supply from a dam Ethiopia has built even when it currently has a fluctuating irregular flow of water.
Some critics of U.S. policy claim the United States has an inherent bias in favor of the TPLF. This could not be further from the truth. We have consistently condemned the TPLF's expansion of the war outside Tigray, and we continue to call on the TPLF to withdraw from Afar and Amhara.
The ambassador claims that US has been tough with the TPLF, consistently telling the TPLF to withdraw from Amhara regions. It is a lip service to make believe that US is equally pressing the two sides. Ethiopians and the world are watching what you do and not what you say. What have you done to quell TPLF's belligerence except treating the outlaws as your 27-year-old friends and equal parties to the legitimate government?
No government can tolerate an armed insurgency. We get that.
The ambassador states that the major offense that broke the camel's back after the Ethiopian government's 2 years attempt to negotiate with the TPLF is just something that can be mentioned as "we get that." Sorry, Mr. Ambassador, but that is the front, the back and the center of the Tigray crisis. United States entered the Second World War because its navy was attacked by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor. The attack occurred on a beautiful Sunday morning while the troops were ambushed unexpectedly while they were having their usual routine, similar to the way it happened on November 4th in Tigray. The Tokyo War Crimes Trial unequivocally declared the attack as war crime based on Article 1 of the Hague Conventions. According to the article, an attack performed without previous and explicit warning was against international law. Mr. Ambassador, when are you going to say the words "TPLF committed a heinous war crime on November 4th, an action that justifies a nation to defend itself as the US did in World War II? Why the double standard? Is US morally bankrupt now to condone insurgency without accountability?
As the war approaches its one-year anniversary, the United States and others cannot continue business as usual relations with the government of Ethiopia. The extraordinary partnership we have enjoyed is not sustainable while the military conflict continues to expand.
In conclusion, he said, unless Ethiopia bends to submit itself to the terms of the US-backed TPLF forces, then business as usual between the two countries will cease. This kind of intimidation is not new to Ethiopia. All the history books are filled with similar foreign intimidation and pressure that attempts to infringe its sovereignty. Remember, the country and people did not even break to colonial powers. Mr. Ambassador, now that the United Nations report says there were no systematic genocide or ethnic cleansing, will you and your affiliates publicly declare that you will not be using this inflaming words to incite violence in association of the Ethiopian conflict? When are you going to demand the TPLF to disarm and go back to Tigray? The Ethiopian government has proposed that to start talking.
Special Counsel Robert Mueller continues his probe into Russian meddling into the 2016 election. We take a look back at Washington's record of meddling in elections across the globe. By one count, the United States has interfered in more than 80 foreign elections between 1946 and 2000. And that doesn't count U.S.-backed coups and invasions. Former CIA Director James Woolsey recently joked about the U.S. record of meddling overseas during an interview with Laura Ingraham on Fox News.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably, but it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the Greeks and the Italians, we
don't do that now, though? We don't mess around other people's elections, Jim?
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on this former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause in the interests of democracy.
All right, thank you.
In 1893, the U.S. helped overthrow the Kingdom of Hawaii. 5 years later, in 1898, the U.S. invaded and occupied Cuba and Puerto Rico. A year later, it was the Philippines. Early 20th century interventions included Nicaragua, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, all in the 1910s.
In 1953, the U.S. helped overthrow the Iranian government. A year later, in 1954, the U.S.-backed coup in Guatemala, overthrowing the democratically elected leader of Guatemala, Jacobo Arbenz. Then in the 60s, the list grew to include, once again, the Dominican Republic, Indonesia, and the Congo. And that's just a partial list. Even with the end of the Cold War, U.S. interference overseas did not end.
I think the Prime Minister of Ethiopia was just elected in with 100% of the vote, which I think suggests, as we have stated in our public statement, some concern for the integrity of the electoral process, at least if not in the outcomes, then in some of the mechanisms that supported the process. the freedom for the opposition to.
But does he think that that was a democratic election?
I said 100%.
Fire.
Having fun there?
USA has a crucial path to choose before it is too late. One is to continue helping TPLF logistically and prolong the death and suffering of millions, potentially destabilizing the Horn of Africa. The other is make policy correction immediately and respect the sovereign state of Ethiopia and its elected government. The choice is grave, and if the latter path is not taken, United States will have a huge crisis that will be many more times worse than Iraq, Afghanistan and others, considering the human toll. 1. Accept the fact that your acceptance and support to TPLF has emboldened TPLF and gaslighted the war. 2. Withdraw your support to the terrorist TPLF and order their immediate disarming. 3. Condemn the insurrectionists and stop equating them with a democratically elected government. 4. Side with and help the Ethiopian government and people. The 24 hours media coverage of the conflict in Ethiopia has been historical. As usual, they have been skewing events, confusion by omission and deliberate misrepresentations and falsehoods. The media is singing US government's tunes in harmony. Unwarranted blocking of Ethiopian Prime Minister's Facebook account, Twitter's censorship of messages favorable to Ethiopian interests are the tip of the iceberg of the assaults that we are witnessing. They have continued to glamorize the terrorist group's persona and embolden its existence. They are beating the drums, cheering its movements, while situations on the ground tell a different story. In conclusion, to the US administration, the Western world, the media, and aid organizations that have ulterior motives to help the terrorist TPLF, we say, they need to reflect back on their actions and correct their mistakes before it is too late. Already too much blood has been shed, and history will judge each and every one of us if we don't change course and save lives.